Belen, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Belen Bilgic-Schneider, and I came to consulting the way I think a lot of people come to consulting. I had a full-time job that I was enjoying, but I looked to move across the country and thought I was going to be able to do it remotely, and some things changed. Unfortunately, it was the beginning of the dot-com crash in 2001. I had a couple years experience as a graphic designer, web designer, after a career shift. And I started to look around at what else could I do? Was I looking for full-time employment or could I be more flexible? Fortunately, it was actually a really great time to be a freelancer. A lot of major tech companies were laying off their full-time employees, but they still had to get the work done. So having someone that was a fixed fee or a more specific project-based contractor was actually really appealing to folks at that point in time.
When you were first starting out and you were being asked for pricing from prospective clients, what were the biggest challenges you had to overcome and how did you overcome them?
There were no great courses like pricing your services to help you figure that stuff out back then. There really weren't that many freelancers. There weren't the networks that there are out there now. So it was kind of a choose your own adventure, figure it out as you go. I started by just trying to make myself as affordable as I could. So I think I was charging my services at something like 20 or 25 an hour. And I did a lot of mixed ideas. I had hourly rates. I tried to do things per bid by project. And I actually found that moving away from an hourly rate and toward bidding projects turned out to be kind of the best of all worlds for me. One of the reasons for that was, I could estimate a project, write out a very specific scope of work, and then I had something really good to hold the client accountable to. A bid rate also meant that I was able to ask for half down, which gave the client a financial incentive to kind of work with me and stay on a project timeline. And it also took away some of that guesswork of when you're on a straight hourly. One of the mistakes that a lot of freelancers made, and I certainly made it, was not checking in often enough with the client about where their money was going and how much that they had accrued on that bill. Hitting a client at the end of the month with a whole lot of hours for work, no matter how happy they are with it, if they didn't see that number coming, oftentimes sticker shock is not your friend. It doesn't build trust, and it really can cause a bit of a grapple that you don't want to have. So the bid format per project for my projects was actually really kind of the way my bread and butter worked in the early days. It was a great model.
What were some mistakes that you've made or that you've seen others make as it relates to pricing projects out?
I mentioned the open hourly rate that I can't emphasize enough. But the next one I think is learning to estimate how much time things take. It's something that we don't have naturally as a skill. I think very few people are good at it from the beginning. It takes practice. And the more accurate you can be in knowing how long something's going to take, obviously the better bids you can write, the better estimates you can give, the more of a heads up you can give to everybody involved about both timeline, your busyness, and what the cost of things are going to be. And it takes practice. You estimate, you break things into smaller pieces, types of activities, you estimate how long it's going to take. When you're done with it, you check back against those estimates and ask yourself, what went wrong? Why did it take longer? Is it something that I can get efficient at? Or was it, barriers that I can get out of my way? Or is this just the cost of doing business? So those are all things that it takes a little bit of reflection and self-study to get a handle on how to estimate what you do, and to look for ways to be more efficient in the work that you do.
You've written proposals and you've helped out with different RFP processes and stuff, but a lot of times you've been in a position where you've had to do the work that was outlined in a proposal for an RFP. What are some pieces of advice that you would give to the proposal writers who are responding to RFPs and RFIs and RFQs and so forth?
Yeah, the biggest one is, being on the receiving end of a proposal that in the proposal they solve the project. It's really tough. It paints your creative team into a corner. Typically at the RFP stage, you don't really know what they're doing with the project. You've got some very high level information. You could take a guess at what they're trying to actually accomplish. But I think the best RFPs really speak to case studies, examples of other companies that you've helped, how you've helped them, why your solutions were pivotal to their success, demonstrating that you're really good at solving problems with the client and producing something spectacular. Because what that does is that sets up your creative team to go in and work collaboratively with the client to solve the problem at hand. And I don't think you really glean and get to the heart of those details until you sit down as a team and start working it through.
And what are some lessons learned you can share regarding contract negotiations with clients or procurement?
Sure. I think you have to decide what's important to you. As a creative person, one of the things that I always had my eye on was, can I show this work in my portfolio? Sometimes that can be a negotiation point where you can, kind of get to maybe some screenshots that don't have branding on them and things like that. And in some cases, you simply can't show the work. And as a creative person who's building a portfolio, typically I would put a higher price tag on that kind of work because I wasn't going to get any of the benefit of being able to show it off and demonstrate the kind of work that I was doing to get other work. So that's a negotiation point that I'd encourage all creative folks to think about is what's the value of this in your portfolio to you, and how can you work around that? Is it a conversation you can have or is it off the table? And how does that affect your pricing? That's a big consideration when what you see is what you get in the creative industry, in people showing off their proposals. I mentioned it earlier. The other thing that I really was pretty adamant about until you get an ongoing relationship is getting some money down, get them financially committed to you. It's a mistake that a lot of novice consultants and freelancers make. Unless you've got some other kind of contract in place where you're going to have an ongoing relationship. I definitely had clients that took a long time to pay, more like 45 or 60 days, but the rate that they paid was high and they consistently paid it. And that kind of speaks to the fact that part of pricing your services is also being able to, kind of manage that monetary flow so that you're not living month to month. It's not an emergency, and you can have a good client that might take 45 days to pay an invoice, as long as that relationship is stable and it's good. The situations where you get into needing the money immediately, that will cause you the absolute most stress as a contractor and as a consultant. And it then starts to kind of color all your interactions with a client. It's great if you can avoid ever being in that position.
What advice would you have for consultants as they start to engage with clients and prospective clients around these pricing conversations, right? What are some suggestions for how to have good conversations with clients?
Build trust. I can't say it enough. Being consultative, offering clients options that can help them save some money here or there, or solve the problem more efficiently or effectively, or help them think about the long-term implications of the decisions they're going to make, not just this month, but in the coming year, in the coming years, the kinds of things they're considering doing, and whether what you're putting in place helps grow that, or will eventually be a dead end and a blockade that they're going to have to get around. The best position you can be in as a consultant is to never have to go look for more clients. And the way that most often happens is you build amazingly good, trustworthy relationships where you're consultative and the people who work with you love working with you. And then they talk about how they love working with you. I was really fortunate that I had clients that I was able to build some good relationships with early. And it meant that all my next clients came as referrals from them. And the place you come into that relationship, if you're referred by someone who's happy with your work, is so much stronger. And you immediately start with a level of credibility that you just don't have if you're starting cold with somebody. So in every aspect of what you do in consulting, think about the people that you're working with and what they need, and balance that, help them find good answers. I don't think anything else will serve you as well as that. Kind of my other offhanded thing would be make sure you always add a buffer in your pricing. Things are going to go wrong. Things are going to take longer than you expect. I worked with someone who she would write a proposal and her husband would double it. I don't know if you necessarily need to double it, but you definitely have to create an amount of buffer time in there that will cover what you can't anticipate, because it's going to happen in every project.
Great. And do you have any final pieces of advice that you'd like to share with folks just starting out with pricing?
You know, you're running your own business. It gives you a lot of control and it gives you a lot of responsibility. And I think once you get used to being in control of those choices, it's really hard to go back. I started consulting and freelancing 15 years ago, and I had a couple of full-time gigs in between, and it just wasn't the same. But there's a lot of thinking and discipline and decisions that have to go into doing it successfully. And if you can be, mindful of what your priorities are, and do things like make those budgets, and be really self-aware of where your money is going, where it's coming from. And then you kind of just have to take a deep breath and ride the waves. There's times as a freelancer, I mean, we all joke about it. It's feast and famine. There's times when you're running like a headless chicken, juggling 2 or 3 clients and everything's on fire and you're running really fast. And then there's that month where you're doing yoga and cooking and bird watching because it's a slow month. And hopefully what you've done is you've set your pricing accordingly, that month can be a month where you recharge your batteries. But expect it. It's not always going to be consistent. It can be a little disheartening and it can be a little nerve-wracking when you're not used to those fluxes and flows. But I find I really like the flux and flow of being a consultant. It gives me those bursts of energy that I really thrive on, and it gives me the downtime to recharge my batteries so that I'm in a really good place the next time I have to get really busy.